Let's pull back the curtain on a holiday celebration from the 1970s Soviet Union. The table is packed with food, but not all is as it seems. One of the most popular cakes had a name that meant something impossible to find, and getting one involved a secret government-run factory and hours waiting in the cold. 1. Olivier salad. The undisputed king of the holiday table was the Olivier salad. To put it mildly, a New Year's party without this salad was not a party at all. Every family had their own slight variation, but the basics were the same. It was a hearty mix of finely diced boiled potatoes, carrots, pickles, green peas, hard-boiled eggs, and some kind of meat, all swimming in a generous sea of mayonnaise. The meat was usually a boiled sausage similar to bologna called doktorskaya sausage. But the thing nobody tells you is that this humble salad has a royal past. It was invented in the 1860s by a Belgian chef named Lucien Olivier, who ran a fancy restaurant in Moscow. His original recipe was a secret, but it was filled with gourmet items like roasted grouse, veal tongue, and even caviar. It was a dish for aristocrats. After the Russian Revolution, the recipe was completely transformed. The fancy ingredients were gone, replaced by simple, affordable things that any Soviet family could find. It became the people's salad. What many overlooked is that this transformation is what made it so popular. It was a little taste of luxury, even if the grouse was now bologna. This salad was so essential that families would make huge bowls of it, enough to last for days. The Olivier salad was more than just food. It was a symbol of celebration. But as central as it was, it often had to share the spotlight with another, even more colorful layered creation, a dish that hid its main ingredient under a vibrant purple blanket. 2. Shuba, or herring under a fur coat. If Olivier salad was the king of the table, then herring under a fur coat was the queen. The name alone is fantastic. In Russian, it's called Saledka pod shuboy, which sounds way more poetic. A shuba is a big, warm fur coat, and that's exactly what this salad looks like. It's a layered masterpiece that looks like a beautiful, colorful cake. On the very bottom, you have a layer of salty, pickled herring cut into small pieces. Then, the fur coat is built on top of it. You start with a layer of finely chopped onions, then boiled potatoes, then shredded carrots, and finally the top layer is made of grated boiled beets. It's the beets that give the salad its stunning deep magenta color. And what holds all these layers together? You guessed it, mayonnaise. Each layer is generously smeared with it, making the whole thing rich and creamy. To finish it off, it's often decorated with grated hard-boiled egg yolks, which look like a fancy trim on the fur coat. Many people are crazy about the origin story of this dish. Legend says it was invented around 1919 by a Moscow tavern owner who wanted a snack that would keep his rowdy customers from getting too drunk and starting fights. The herring represented the working class, the potatoes and carrots stood for the peasants, and the red beets on top symbolized the red flag of the revolution. It was a salad of unity. While that story might just be a myth, it's a good one. This dish was a work of art and a staple of every holiday feast. This salad was a showstopper for sure, but sometimes a celebration called for something a little lighter, yet just as beautifully layered, a salad named after a delicate yellow flower. 3. Mimosa salad. Not every holiday salad was as heavy as Olivier or Shuba. When families wanted something a little more delicate, they turned to the mimosa salad. It got its name because the top layer, made of crumbled, bright yellow egg yolks, looks just like the little blossoms of a mimosa tree in the springtime. It was a beautiful dish that brought a bit of sunshine to the winter holiday table. Just like the other famous salads, mimosa is a layered affair held together with mayonnaise. The thing nobody tells you is that the star of this salad was usually canned fish. This made it a bit of a luxury, as canned goods, especially fish, were considered a real treat. The most common choice was a can of sorry or mackerel, packed in oil. The fish would be drained and mashed up to create the bottom layer. From there, you'd add layers of grated boiled potatoes, grated carrots, and finely chopped onions. The most interesting layer was the grated hard-boiled egg whites, which created a snowy white band in the middle of the salad. Each layer, of course, got its own coating of mayonnaise. The final touch was sprinkling those crumbled egg yolks all over the top. Some people even got extra fancy and added a layer of grated cheese for more richness. It was a surprisingly light and fluffy salad compared to its potato-heavy cousins, and it was a welcome addition to the festive spread. Canned fish was a clever way to add flavor and protein. But Soviet cooks had another trick up their sleeves for getting the taste of expensive seafood, a trick that involved a completely fake ingredient that everyone loved anyway. 4. Crab stick salad. What do you do when you want to serve a fancy crab salad, but actual crab costs a fortune and is impossible to find? You invent a salad with crab sticks. To put it mildly, this salad was a sensation in the later Soviet years. Crab sticks, which are not made of crab at all, first appeared in the Soviet Union and became instantly popular. They are actually made from surimi, which is a paste of white fish, usually pollock, that is flavored, colored, and shaped to look like crab leg meat. For Soviet people, this was a taste of the exotic. The salad itself was super simple to make, which made it perfect for busy holiday preparations. The crab sticks were chopped up and mixed with canned sweet corn, another ingredient that felt a bit special and foreign. Then you'd add some boiled rice to make it more filling, and maybe some chopped hard-boiled eggs and fresh cucumber for a bit of crunch. And of course, the whole thing was mixed together with a healthy amount of mayonnaise. What many overlooked is that this salad represented a changing time. It showed a desire for new flavors and a connection to the outside world, even if it was through an imitation product. Kids loved this salad because of its slightly sweet taste from the corn and the fun, chewy texture of the crab sticks. It was bright, colorful, and felt modern compared to some of the more traditional dishes. It quickly became a holiday must-have, sitting right alongside the classic Olivier and Schuba. These salads were often the opening act of the holiday meal. But before anyone picked up a fork to dig into them, they often started with a hot, steaming bowl of a very unique and hearty soup. 5. Solyanka soup. Before the marathon of eating salads and cold appetizers began, a holiday meal would sometimes kick off with a bowl of hot soup. And not just any soup. We're talking about solyanka. This soup is a legend. It's thick, it's hearty, and it has a very distinct salty and sour flavor. It's the kind of soup that wakes up your taste buds and prepares you for the feast to come. Many people swear it's the best cure for a hangover, which made it a popular choice for the day after a big celebration too. The thing nobody tells you is that the secret to solyanka's amazing flavor is pickles, and lots of them. Not just the pickles themselves, but the pickle juice, or brine, is a key ingredient in the soup's broth. This gives it that signature sour kick. The soup was also a great way to use up whatever bits and pieces of meat you had. A good solyanka could have several types of meat in it all at once, like beef, ham, and different kinds of sausages. It was a real hodgepodge. Onions, carrots, and tomato paste form the base, but then comes the good stuff. Besides the meat and pickles, you'd find olives and capers in the pot, which were very exotic ingredients for the time. A slice of lemon was always served on top, adding a fresh, citrusy aroma. A big dollop of sour cream, called smetana, was stirred in right before eating, making the soup rich and creamy. It was a complex, flavor-packed dish that felt incredibly luxurious, a perfect way to start a grand holiday meal. A hot soup was a fantastic starter, but the table also needed to be loaded with appetizers you could nibble on throughout the night. The next item on our list was less of a single dish and more of a proud display of prized possessions. 6. Cold cuts platter. No Soviet holiday table was complete without a giant platter of assorted cold cuts. This wasn't just an appetizer, it was a status symbol. You see, getting high-quality sausage or cured meat was a real challenge. It often required special connections or access to stores that weren't open to the general public. So, when you laid out a beautiful arrangement of sliced meats, you were showing your guests that you were a person who could get things done. The platter would feature a few different types of sausage. The most common was doktorskaya, or doctor's sausage, a pale pink, simple bologna-style sausage that was supposedly developed to be nutritious and healthy. Then you might have some servelat, a semi-smoked, more flavorful sausage. If you were really lucky, you'd have some salami-style smoked sausage, which was the most prized of all. Each type would be sliced paper-thin and arranged in beautiful overlapping circles or fanned out like a deck of cards. But it wasn't just sausage. The platter would also include slices of cheese, usually a simple, mild yellow cheese. And for a truly authentic touch, there would be salo. Salo is a slab of cured pork fatback. It might sound strange, but it's a beloved snack. It would be sliced very thinly and served with black bread and garlic. What many overlooked is that this simple platter of meat and cheese was a quiet display of wealth and resourcefulness, a testament to the host's ability to provide a true feast for their family and friends. These platters were perfect for grazing, but the holiday also required something more substantial and handmade, a dish that involved the entire family gathering in the kitchen for a day of pinching and folding. 7. Pelmeni. Pelmeni are little dumplings, and they are one of the most beloved comfort foods in all of Russia. For the holidays, they were an absolute must. Think of them as tiny, round ravioli, usually filled with a mix of ground pork and beef, seasoned with onion and garlic. The process of making them was a holiday tradition in itself. The whole family would gather around the kitchen table for a pelmeni making party. Someone would roll out the thin dough, someone else would place little dollops of the meat filling, and everyone would help fold and seal the dumplings. Families would make hundreds of them at a time, sometimes even thousands. You see, the thing nobody tells you is that in places like Siberia, winter was their giant freezer. After making a huge batch of pelmeni, they would spread them out on trays and leave them outside on the balcony or porch to freeze solid. Then they'd be gathered into a cloth bag and stored outside for the rest of the winter. This meant you could have a hot, delicious meal ready in minutes, anytime you wanted. For a holiday celebration, the pelmeni would be boiled in a big pot of salty water until they floated to the top. They were served simply, in a bowl with a big spoonful of sour cream or a splash of vinegar and black pepper. Sometimes a lucky pelmen was hidden in the batch. It might be filled with black pepper, a coin wrapped in foil, or just salt. Whoever got the lucky dumpling was said to have good luck for the rest of the year. It was a fun and delicious tradition that brought everyone together. Making hundreds of dumplings was a labor of love. But there was another dish that required just as much careful work, this time involving wrapping a similar meat filling inside tender leaves of cabbage. 8. Golubtsi, or cabbage rolls. Another hearty, hot dish that often graced the holiday table was golubtsi. The name translates to little pigeons, which is a bit strange since there are no pigeons involved. The name likely comes from the way the little rolls look, like small roosting birds. These are stuffed cabbage rolls, and they are pure comfort food. To make them, you take a large head of cabbage and carefully boil it to soften the leaves. Then you gently peel off each leaf one by one. The filling is very similar to what you'd find in pelmeni. It's usually a mix of ground beef and pork, combined with cooked rice, sautéed onions, and carrots. This savory mixture is then spooned onto a cabbage leaf, which is carefully folded and tucked into a neat little parcel. It takes a bit of skill to get them just right, so they don't fall apart. Once all the little rolls are made, they are placed snugly in a large pot. Then they are covered in a thin tomato-based sauce, often made with tomato paste, sour cream, and broth. The pot is put on the stove to simmer slowly for an hour or more. During that time, the cabbage becomes incredibly tender, and all the flavors meld together. Serving them hot, smothered in that creamy tomato sauce, was a perfect way to warm up on a cold winter night. To put it mildly, they were a taste of home, a dish that felt like a warm hug from a grandmother. These cabbage rolls were a classic main course. But when the weather was warmer, or for a big outdoor celebration, the cooking method changed from a slow simmer on the stove to the hot, fiery flames of a grill. 9. Shashlik skewers. If you were celebrating a holiday in the spring or summer, like May Day, the star of the show was often cooked outdoors. We're talking about shashlik. Shashlik are skewers of grilled meat, similar to shish kebabs. This tradition comes from the Caucasus region, like Georgia and Armenia, and it became wildly popular all over the Soviet Union. It represented a more relaxed outdoor style of celebrating, often at a dacha, which is a small summer house or cottage in the countryside. The key to amazing shashlik is the marinade. The meat, usually pork or lamb, would be cut into cubes about an inch or two in size. Then it would be soaked in a marinade overnight or even for a couple of days. Every family had their own secret recipe for the marinade. Some used a base of vinegar and water, while others used kefir, a type of tangy yogurt. Many people are crazy about a marinade made with mineral water, believing the bubbles help to tenderize the meat. But the one ingredient everyone agreed on was onions. Lots and lots of sliced onions were mixed in with the meat, along with salt, pepper, and bay leaves. When it was time to cook, the meat would be threaded onto long metal skewers. The cooking itself was a ritual. The grill, called a mangal, was filled with wood coals. Getting the coals to the perfect temperature, glowing red with a light layer of white ash, was considered an art form. The skewers were laid over the coals and turned carefully, basting them with the leftover marinade until the meat was perfectly cooked and slightly charred on the outside. The smell alone was enough to make your mouth water. Grilling meat over an open flame was a special occasion. But back in the kitchen, there was another very traditional dish, a soup that, like solyanka, relied on the sour power of pickles for its unique flavor. 10. Rasolnik. While solyanka was the flashy meat-filled soup, rasolnik was its older, more traditional cousin. This is an ancient Russian soup with a history going back centuries. Its name comes from the word rasol, which means brine, the salty, sour liquid that pickles are cured in. Just like with solyanka, this pickle brine is the heart and soul of the soup, giving it a distinctive tangy taste that is surprisingly refreshing. What many overlooked is that the other key ingredient in a classic rasolnik is pearl barley. The barley gives the soup a wonderful, slightly chewy texture and makes it very filling. The soup usually starts with a beef or chicken broth. Then you add the barley along with potatoes, carrots, and onions. The pickles are diced up and added towards the end of the cooking, along with a healthy splash of that all-important pickle brine. The thing nobody tells you is how resourceful this soup was. It used ingredients that were available all year round, like root vegetables and preserved pickles. Using the pickle brine meant that nothing went to waste. It was a smart, frugal dish. While it was often made with meat, a vegetarian version was also very popular, especially during times of religious fasting. It was served hot, always with a dollop of sour cream and a sprinkle of fresh dill. It was a taste of history in a bowl, a soup that connected the 1970s holiday table to generations past. This soup was a nod to old traditions. But there was another salad on the table that looked similar to herring under a fur coat, but had a completely different, non-mayonnaise-based dressing. 11. Vinaigrette salad. With so many rich mayonnaise-heavy salads on the table, the vinaigrette salad was a breath of fresh air. Its name is a little confusing because in America, a vinaigrette is a type of salad dressing. But in this case, it's the name of the salad itself. And ironically, the dressing is not a traditional vinaigrette at all. It's usually just sunflower oil, maybe with a little salt and pepper. This salad is instantly recognizable by its vibrant, ruby red color. That color comes from its main ingredient, boiled beets. The beets are diced into small, neat cubes, and they stain everything else in the bowl a beautiful shade of pink. Along with the beets, the salad contains diced boiled potatoes, carrots, and salty pickles. Some versions also include sauerkraut for an extra tangy crunch, or kidney beans for more protein. You see, this salad was an everyday staple, but it was so beloved that it always earned a spot on the holiday table too. It's a very healthy salad, full of vitamins and fiber. It was also popular during Lent because it's naturally vegan. The combination of sweet beets, earthy potatoes, and sour pickles, all brought together with a simple oil dressing, was a perfect balance of flavors. It provided a much-needed contrast to the creamy richness of the other salads. To put it mildly, it was the sensible, healthy choice that everyone secretly loved. Most dishes were meant to be eaten with a fork or spoon. But our next holiday specialty was a strange and wobbly creation that required careful slicing and had a reputation for being very tricky to get right. 12. Jellied fish. Here is a dish that is truly old school. Jellied fish, known as zalavnaya ryba, is a type of aspic. Aspic is a savory jelly made from meat or fish stock. It was considered a very elegant and festive dish, something you'd make to really impress your guests. It looks beautiful, with pieces of fish and colorful vegetables suspended in a clear, shimmering jelly, like a mosaic trapped in amber. The process to make it was quite involved. First, you had to make a very flavorful and clear fish broth, called a bouillon. This was usually done by simmering a whole fish, like a pike or perch, with vegetables and spices. After the fish was cooked, it was carefully removed, and all the bones were picked out. The broth was then strained through cheesecloth multiple times to make it perfectly clear. Gelatin was added to the broth to make it set. Then came the artistic part. A thin layer of the jelly was poured into a mold and allowed to set in the cold. Then, the pieces of cooked fish, along with decorations like sliced carrots cut into flower shapes, green peas, and sprigs of parsley, were arranged on top. The rest of the jelly mixture was poured over everything, and the whole thing was put back in the fridge for hours until it was completely firm. The thing nobody tells you is how easily this dish could go wrong. If your broth wasn't flavorful enough, it would taste bland. If you used too much gelatin, it would be rubbery. It became famously mocked in a classic Soviet New Year's movie, The Irony of Fate, where a character says, "Your jellied fish is a real disgrace." But when it was made well, it was a true delicacy. This jellied dish was a fancy centerpiece. But sometimes the most cherished part of the holiday meal wasn't a complicated recipe at all, but a simple, sweet-smelling fruit that was almost impossible to get. 13. Tangerines. It might seem strange to list a simple fruit alongside all these complex salads and main courses, but for anyone who grew up in the Soviet Union in the 1970s, tangerines were not just a fruit. They were the official smell and taste of New Year's Eve. To put it mildly, they were a symbol of pure holiday magic. The reason for this was simple: scarcity. Tangerines, or mandarins, weren't grown in most of Russia. They had to be imported from the warmer parts of the Soviet Union, primarily from the Abkhazian region in Georgia. They ripened in late December, so a huge shipment of them would arrive in the cold, snowy cities right before the New Year holiday. This was often the only time all year you could find them. The arrival of the tangerines was a major event. People would stand in enormous lines, sometimes for hours in the freezing cold, just to buy a kilogram, which is a little over 2 pounds. The smell of the citrusy peels would fill the apartment as kids and adults alike peeled them. Finding a bowl of these bright orange globes on the holiday table was a sign of a prosperous and happy celebration. What many overlooked is that for a whole generation, the scent of tangerine peel is forever linked with the feeling of holiday excitement, family gatherings, and the hope for a happy new year. It was a simple, yet incredibly powerful part of the tradition. The sweet smell of tangerines filled the air, but there were other baked goods on the table, savory little pockets of dough that were perfect for grabbing as you mingled with guests. 14. Pierogi with mushrooms. Pierogi are small, baked or fried pies, and they are a cornerstone of Russian cuisine. They can have dozens of different fillings, both sweet and savory. For a holiday, a big platter of warm pierogi was a perfect appetizer or snack. While fillings like meat or cabbage were common, the mushroom-filled ones felt particularly special and festive. The dough for pierogi is typically a soft, slightly sweet yeast dough. It's rolled out and cut into circles. In the center of each circle, a spoonful of the mushroom filling is placed. The filling was often made from dried mushrooms that had been soaked to rehydrate them. Dried mushrooms have a very intense, earthy flavor. They would be chopped finely and cooked with onions and maybe some herbs. Once filled, the dough is folded over and the edges are pinched together to create a neat little boat shape. They could be baked in the oven until they were golden brown or fried in oil for a crispier, more indulgent treat. The smell of them baking is one of the coziest smells imaginable. People would grab them while they were still hot, a perfect little bite to hold in your hand while you chatted and celebrated. Many people are crazy about them because they are the ultimate comfort food, a taste of tradition that has been passed down through generations. These savory pies were a huge hit. But as the night wore on and it was time for dessert, an even more impressive baked good made its appearance, a cake with 100 layers and a name linked to French history. 15. Napoleon cake. When it came to holiday desserts, the Napoleon cake was in a class of its own. This was not a simple cake. It was a towering monument of pastry, a labor of love. That took hours or even days to prepare. It consists of many super thin layers of flaky puff pastry, sandwiched together with a rich creamy custard filling. The thing nobody tells you is that making the pastry from scratch was a heroic effort. It involved rolling out dough with butter over and over again to create those paper-thin layers. Many busy Soviet women used a shortcut, making a simpler fake puff pastry that was easier but still delicious. They would bake a dozen or more large, thin, cracker-like layers of this pastry until they were golden and crisp. While the pastry layers cooled, they would make the custard, a creamy concoction of milk, eggs, sugar, and a little flour to thicken it. Then came the assembly. Each crispy pastry layer was generously slathered with the sweet cream. Layer after layer, the cake was built up. The cream would soften the crispy pastry, and the whole thing would be left to sit for at least a day, allowing the layers to meld together. The top and sides of the cake were then covered with crumbs made from the leftover baked pastry scraps. Every bite was a perfect mix of flaky, soft, and creamy. Legend says the cake was created in 1912 to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of Russia's victory over Napoleon Bonaparte, with the triangular slices representing his hat. The Napoleon cake was a masterpiece of patience. But there was another, more modern cake that was even more desirable, a cake so famous you often had to buy it on the black market. 16. Ptyché Moloko. If the Napoleon was the classic historical dessert, then the bird's milk cake was the trendy modern superstar of the 1970s. Its name, Ptyché Moloko, translates to bird's milk, which is an old expression for something so rare and wonderful that it's practically impossible to get. And to put it mildly, this cake was very difficult to get. It was the first cake to ever be officially patented by the Soviet government. The cake was invented by a group of master confectioners at a famous restaurant in Moscow. It consists of a light, airy soufflé, almost like a marshmallow, that is sandwiched between two thin layers of sponge cake and covered in a layer of dark chocolate glaze. It was unlike any other cake people had tasted before. It was light, delicate, and not overly sweet. The problem was, only a few special state-run bakeries knew the secret recipe and were allowed to make it. The demand was insane. Every day, gigantic lines would form outside these bakeries, with people waiting for hours in hopes of buying one. They often sold out within an hour. This scarcity made the cake an ultimate status symbol. If you showed up to a party with a real bird's milk cake, you were a hero. What many overlooked is that this created a whole side business for people who would buy the cakes and then resell them for a much higher price. It was more than a dessert. It was a treasure. It was a treasure. It was a treasure. It was a treasure.